Good evening, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next 30 minutes. US President Donald Trump orders tariff probe on all US critical mineral imports amid national security concerns. Electronic goods, semicon, smartphone imports to bear the brunt. India calls for inclusion of new diversity parameters such as religion, faith as basis for representation in the UNSC. And after years of negotiations, WHO countries strike landmark agreement on tackling future pandemics. US President Donald Trump has ordered a probe on Tuesday that may result in tariffs on critical minerals, rare earth metals, and associated products such as smartphones in an escalation of his dispute with global trade partners. The order states critical minerals and their derivatives are essential for US military and energy infrastructure, noting their use in jet engines, missile guidance systems, and advanced computing, among others. Trump has upended markets in recent weeks with his sweeping on-off levies, and this investigation could see him impose further tariffs if it shows that imports of critical minerals and their derivatives endanger American national security. The imports targeted included so-called critical minerals like cobalt, lithium, nickel, rare earth elements, as well as products that partly require these resources such as electric vehicles and batteries. US President Donald Trump confirmed on Truth Social platforms that he will be holding talks over tariffs with Japan envoy on Wednesday. Many other nations will also hold talks with the United States. Meanwhile, China tells Trump to stop threatening and blackmailing as the country appointed its new international trade negotiator. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump's tariffs have got the nations scrambling to seek alternative strategies to offset the headwinds surging towards their respective economies. Global leaders are crisscrossing continents to further strengthen trade relations and forge new partnerships. China's President Xi Jinping is in Malaysia as part of his tour of Southeast Asia to further consolidate economic and trading ties with traditional trade allies. Earlier, China and Vietnam signed 45 cooperation agreements on, among other things, supply chains and artificial intelligence. Simultaneously, China is preparing for what could be challenging times ahead. On Wednesday, China appointed a new trade negotiator, Li Chenggan, who will be key in any talks over tariffs with the United States. President Trump has said that China's efforts to ramp up trade pacts with Asian economies were aimed to corner the United States. Even US allies, which have relied heavily on exports to Washington, are now keen to probe possibilities of new alliances. South Korea and Vietnam have agreed to raise their bilateral trade to $150 billion by 2030. Allies are also making a dash to Washington to seek a favorable trade deal with the United States. South Korea's Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok will meet his US counterpart Scott Bessent next week with an aim to delay imposition of reciprocal tariffs as much as possible. Tokyo's envoy has also left for Washington. He said that they are confident of a win-win outcome while protecting Japanese national interests. Spanish Economy Minister Carlos Cuerpo said that he was convinced that the United States and the European Union would negotiate a fair trade deal after meeting with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Indonesian officials are also coming to Washington. They are expected to propose an increase in crude oil and liquefied petroleum gas imports from the United States by around $10 billion as part of its tariffs negotiations. Ayushi Bhatnagar's report, DD India.
Meanwhile, US President Trump has threatened to strip Harvard of its tax-exempt status as the feud with the college escalated. The action comes after the president already moved to freeze some $2.2 billion of federal funding to Harvard University over its refusal to agree to demands which include how the university selects students. DD India's Harshita Oberoi gets us more.
The Trump administration has issued a stark ultimatum. Harvard must fall in line or risk losing its protected tax status. Trump posted on social media that Harvard should lose its tax exempt status and be taxed as a political entity if it does not submit to the demands for the university to change the way it runs itself, including selection of students and authority for professors.
First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students.
The government froze more than $2 billion in federal research contracts and grants after President Alan Garber vowed to protect constitutional rights, declaring the university will not be taken over. Harvard has enlisted law firms, including Queen Emanuel, to defend its autonomy. The pressure campaign echoes a similar clash with Columbia University. After protests on campus, the administration cut $400 million in funding. Dozens of universities are separately battling the Trump administration in court over broad research funding cuts that have led to staff layoffs. Meanwhile, 3 law students have filed a lawsuit against the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, challenging its investigation into diversity, equity, and inclusion policies at 20 major US law firms. They claim the agency is unlawfully collecting personal data, weaponizing it under political orders. Harshita Oberoy's report for DD India.
In other news, Canada is preparing for the elections in the full swing, where main party leaders Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre face off in a fiery debate on Wednesday. The debate could prove pivotal ahead of this month's election, where Prime Minister Mark Carney's French language skills are set to be tested. In a departure from past Canadian elections, polls indicate this year's race is largely becoming a two-party contest, raising the debate stakes for Carney and Poilievre. Both candidates have strong hold on current economic conditions of the country and are significantly addressing the tariff situations with the US. After more than 3 years of negotiations and final overnight push, countries at the World Health Organization (WHO) have agreed on a historic pandemic accord aimed at avoiding a repeat of the mistakes made during the COVID crisis. Adopted on Wednesday, the 32-page agreement outlines global cooperation on pandemic preparedness, prevention and response. It marks the first major international health accord since the pandemic began 5 years ago. The agreement comes amid growing threats like H5N1, bird flu, measles, mpox. While the US did not participate in the talks, their absence loomed large, especially amid concerns over tariffs on medical goods.
Marks a significant milestone in our shared journey toward a safer world. We celebrate the successful conclusion of negotiations on a draft pandemic agreement, completed in just 3.5 years.
The Israeli troops will remain in the buffer zones that they have created in Gaza, even after any settlement to end the war. Defense Minister Israel Katz has said his efforts to revive a ceasefire agreement faltered. Since resuming their operation last month, Israeli forces have carved out a broad security zone extending deep into Gaza and squeezing more than 2 million Palestinians into ever smaller areas in the south along the coastline. In southern Gaza alone, Israeli forces have seized about 20% of the enclave's territory, taking control of the border city of Rafah and pushing inland up to so-called Murak corridor that runs from the eastern edge of Gaza to the Mediterranean Sea between Rafah and the city of Khan Yunis. Israel says its forces have killed hundreds of Hamas fighters, including many senior commanders of the group. But the operation has alarmed the United Nations, European countries. Meanwhile, Israel on Wednesday said it would keep blocking humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. Moving on, the Kremlin on Wednesday declined to specify when 30-day moratorium on strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure would end or whether it would be extended. This was just hours before the agreement was set to expire. Ukrainian Air Force launched 97 drones during overnight attacks. The Air Force said it shot down some 57 drones, with another 34 not reaching their targets, likely due to electronic warfare countermeasures. Ukrainian officials said Russia's drone attack on the Black Sea port city of Odessa damaged residential buildings, warehouses, civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, Ukraine's parliament has extended martial law until August, delaying timing of new elections that the United States and Russia have been pushing for. The European Union on Wednesday published a list of 7 countries it considers safe in a bid to speed up migrant returns by making it harder for citizens of those nations to claim asylum in the bloc. The European Commission said it was proposing to designate Kosovo, Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt, India, Morocco and Tunisia as safe countries of origin. The move is set to allow EU governments to process asylum applications filed from citizens of those countries more quickly by introducing a presumption that such applications lack merit. EU candidate countries would also in principle meet the criteria to be designated as safe countries, exceptions being when they are hit by conflict, the Commission added. Russian President Xi Jinping was welcomed at the Malaysia's National Palace on Wednesday. Xi is on a highly anticipated state visit that comes as Beijing fights an escalating trade war with the United States. Xi is scheduled to hold a bilateral meeting with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar, where the leaders are expected to sign a number of partnership deals. Xi's trip to Malaysia as part of the Southeast Asia tour that has already taken him to Vietnam will also include Cambodia, with Beijing trying to position itself as a stable alternative to Trump's punitive tariff regime. Xi said he expected to use his visit as an opportunity to further deepen bilateral traditional friendship and strengthen political mutual trust. China has remained Malaysia's largest trading partner for 16 consecutive years. Let's now turn to other stories making news around the world. In a sharp diplomatic move, France is expelling 12 Algerian diplomats and consular staff and recalling its ambassador to Algiers for consultations. The decision follows Algeria's protest over the detention of an Algerian consular agent in France, suspected of involvement in kidnapping of an opposition activist. Climate activists rallied in Brazil's capital, Brasilia, urging the country to champion a just energy transition at COP30. Demonstrators used ashes from Amazon fires to paint banners and symbolically cast the ashes into a pond outside the foreign ministry, calling for climate talks that put people and social justice at the forefront. In Iraq's Tohouk province, Yazidis gathered at a sacred Lalish temple to mark Red Wednesday, the Yazidi New Year. Dressed in traditional attire, men and women lit candles on the eve of celebrations, illuminating the ancient site in a vibrant display of faith and resilience. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. India reports record exports of $821 billion despite global headwinds. April 16, special day for Indian Railways, a journey that began 172 years ago with a single track.
This week on Defense Dynamic, India and the United States wrap up Exercise Tiger Trump 2025 on India's east coast. India successfully tests its long-range glide bomb Gaurav. Can this homegrown weapon redefine precision strike capability and send a strong message across the border? What are direct energy weapons? Why, after successful trial of DRDO's DEW, India is now in the exclusive club? And inside the Indian Air Forces, how the Wolf Pack strategy is transforming aerial warfare, coordination and lethal intent. Tune in this Wednesday at 8 PM IST only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. German conservatives under Friedrich Merz agreed a coalition deal with centre-left Social Democrats on April 9th, aiming to revive growth in Europe's largest economy. Merz conservatives will lead the government with the Social Democrats as coalition partners. Pressure to reach a deal has taken on new urgency as the government will take charge at a time of global turbulence in an escalating trade conflict sparked by US President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. Mayor said coalition agreement his Conservatives reached with Social Democrats was a sign that Europe could rely on Germany. And for more, let's talk to Thomas Sparrow, correspondent with our partners DW in Berlin. Thomas, what will be the government's most pressing challenges once it comes into office?
The most urgent challenge, no doubt, will be the relation to the United States, a relation that has been significant, very important also on historic terms here in Germany, but that has obviously changed since Donald Trump came into power in Washington. You mentioned already the tariffs, you mentioned already the policies that he has implemented, and those policies that are no doubt affecting Germany, especially as Germany is a country that has an economic development based on its exports. So undoubtedly for Friedrich Merz and for his government, the main challenge at the beginning will be to deal with Donald Trump in the United States. The strategy there is, on the one hand, to still foster dialogue, to still foster commitment, but on the other hand, from a European perspective, to stay firm and strong when the United States and Europe do not see eye to eye. But beyond that, it is clear that there are many other projects and many other proposals that the German government wants to implement, from strengthening defense spending, from increasing investment also in infrastructure, to having a much more stricter policy on irregular migration. Those are all policy proposals that the German government would want to implement in the next few years.
Okay, you mentioned Trump and relations with the United States, but to what extent is Germany looking to strengthen relations with other parts of the world, India, for example?
Well, you mentioned India, and India does play a significant role in the coalition agreement that was presented to the public. That's 146 pages with all sorts of proposals related to the economy, to policy, to social aspects as well. And in that document, the German government, the incoming German government, stresses that they would like to deepen relations with India on all levels, specifically to tackle global challenges like climate change, but also when it comes to international security. It's not only also India. Germany would want to deepen relations with other parts of the world as well, from Australia to countries in Africa. And that is also, at least what analysts point, a direct response to the idea that they cannot count on the United States as their only and main partner, that they have to basically foster relations with other parts of the world. And in that particular area, the incoming German government will try and build on what the previous German government did, which was to try and obviously foster deeper and better relations also with the government in India.
Okay, and how does the German public view this new government and this approach?
If I had to summarize it in one word, I would say skepticism, because while on the one hand, many in Germany do view positively the fact that that coalition agreement was agreed in relatively short amount of time, only around a month or a month and a half, and that's shorter than in previous occasions, there are many people that actually view skeptically that actually change can happen in Germany, that promised change will happen under the incoming government. That is something that we've seen from several polls in the recent days, in recent weeks, and that is something that the German government will have to deal with. Not only these proposals, not only all these different challenges, but also how to convince the German public that they can indeed trigger change when it comes to some of those challenges that we've been discussing here.
Thomas, thank you for joining us with those updates. On to some other stories. India has rejected the attempts to introduce new parameters, including religion and faith, as basis for representation in a reformed UN Security Council. New Delhi asserted that the latest attempts to include new criteria stands opposed to the accepted basis of regional representation. Participating in intergovernmental negotiations meeting on size of the future council and cluster discussion on regional representation, India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador P. Harish, said those opposed to the text-based negotiations do not seek progress on UNSC reforms.
First, those opposed to text-based negotiations do not seek progress on reforms. Second, an argument that an expanded and reformed Security Council would not be efficient is an attempt to stall real reforms. A reformed council with appropriate working methods and accountability mechanisms would be equipped to function effectively and deliver meaningfully on pressing global issues. Third, a consolidated model that does not cover expansion in both the permanent and non-permanent categories would not achieve the purpose of reform, further entrenching the status quo. And finally, attempts to introduce new parameters such as religion and faith as basis for representation in a reformed council runs completely counter to regional representation, which has been the accepted basis for representation in the United Nations.
India's exports turned positive after a period of about 4 months. The cumulative exports of merchandise and services during the financial year 24-25 is estimated to grow by 5.5% at US $820.93 billion as compared to $778.13 billion in the last fiscal year. The cumulative value of merchandise exports during financial year 24-25 April to March was $437.42 billion, registering a positive growth of about 0.08% as compared to $437.07 billion during financial year 2023-24 April-March. India witnessed the highest ever export of non-petroleum merchandise during the fiscal year ending March 2025, with an increase of 6% in financial year 24-25. The exports were valued at $374.08 billion as compared to $352.92 billion in financial year 23-24. Major drivers of merchandise exports growth in financial year 24-25 include coffee, tobacco, electronic goods, rice, jute, manufactured products and several other commodities. Coffee exports in particular rose to over 40% from US $1.29 billion in financial year 23-24 to $1.81 billion in financial year 24-25. On April 16, 1853, a train ran for the first time between Boribandar in Bombay and Thane, a journey that changed the course of India's future. Let's take a ride down the tracks of history. Here's a special report by our correspondent Abhishek Singh on Indian Railways Foundation Day.
April 16, 1853, the day that marked a turning point in India's history. On this day, the first passenger train ran between Boribandar in Bombay and Thane, covering a distance of nearly 33.8 kilometers. It was a defining moment that ushered India into the railway era. The train had 14 carriages and carried about 400 distinguished passengers. It was powered by 3 steam locomotives, Sahib, Sultan and Sindh. Departing at 3:30 p.m., it reached Thane in about an hour. This first ever train journey was flagged off with a 21-gun salute, a grand celebration that marked the birth of Indian Railways. Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnav also took to social media today, calling it a historic day for Indian Railways. His message on X highlighted how a journey that began years ago has now made India a global leader in rail transport. From that humble beginning, Indian Railways has evolved into a smart, fast and eco-conscious transport system. Trains like Vande Bharat Express now offer speed and comfort, while stations in cities like Ayodhya, Bhopal and Gandhinagar have been transformed into world-class hubs. Today, ticketing is Wi-Fi enabled and paperless, and Indian Railways is aiming for net zero carbon emissions by 2030.
भारतीय रेल देश की जीवन रेखा है। आज ही के दिन पहली बार 1853 में देश की पहली रेलगाड़ी बोरीबंदर से थाने के बीच चलाई गई थी और उसकी स्मृति में आज का दिन रेल दिवस के रूप में मनाया जाता है। पूरे देशवासियों को इस शुभ अवसर पर मैं बधाई देना चाहता हूं। अपनी स्थापना काल से लेकर अब तक भारतीय रेल ने देश की एकता को मजबूत प्रदान करने में महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाई है और साथ ही प्रतिदिन 2.5 करोड़ से 3 करोड़ लोगों को सेवाएं प्रदान की है।
Whether it's the Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train project or dedicated freight corridors, Indian Railways is drawing new lines across the map, shaping the vision of a developed India by 2047. Today, nearly 30 to 40 million people travel by train every day. What began with just 34 kilometers of track in 1853 has now become a vast network of over 68,000 kilometers. In the last 11 years, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership, Indian Railways has achieved milestone after milestone, becoming not just a mode of transport but a symbol of progress. Abhishek Singh's report for DD India.
What a historic journey for the Indian Railways. Moving on, tremors from an earthquake were felt in and around Kathmandu Valley. Today, 5 magnitude earthquake occurred this morning with its epicenter in Dingze, China, which is about 18 kilometers from Nepal's northern border. No damages have been reported yet. Nepal's Jajarkot district experienced series of earthquakes, each of magnitude approximately 4 on Monday. Indian Army is full of stories of valor and heroism, but this is the story of the most decorated soldier, Naib Subedar Chunnilal. He won 3 out of 4 top military honours and laid down his life for the nation. The awe-inspiring story of Naib Subedar Chunnilal has been penned by retired General of the Indian Army and released in Delhi by Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan. The family of the soldier was also present on the occasion. DT India's correspondent Vishal Baristo finds out more.
Bravest of the brave, this is the story of a soldier who at the young age of 19 got an gallantry award, and this was not the first one. He went on to achieve 3 out of 4 highest gallantry awards from the Indian Army. And I have with me General S.K. Dua, who wrote this fine book.
I am talking about the situation when Chunnilal was a Havaldar. And as you rightly brought out, he was already a Sena Medal as a young rookie soldier when he was just 19 years old. So a decade later, he was an experienced Havaldar and a section commander when I was the commanding officer. And that time I found we were on the LOC, we used to have a lot of encounter with terrorists in 1998, 99, 2000. And when Chunni was present in an encounter, I would be assured.
Colonel Sean, today the book is out in the public and we all heard that inspiring story, rather stories of inspiration. So what is your memory of Naib Subedar Chunnilal, especially of his supreme sacrifice?
He was an inspiration right from the time we joined. I joined in 94. In that time he was already a Sena Medal from Siachen days. And he has been with us in almost every, whether it was games, whether it was in operations, whether it was even in training. Chunnilal was always there in some way or the other.
So there you heard from the officers, from the commanding officer. He was a man with a mission to serve his country with utmost sacrifice. With cameraman Uttam in Delhi, this is Vishal Baristo for DD India.
That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on Android and iOS. Scan the QR code, download now. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.